Hello friends, this is Bilal Haider, and in this video part we are going to learn about another array method that can be very useful in several scenarios. So let's say you have an array and you want to fill it all with some values, right? So let's say I have 20, 30, 500, 200, 100 in here. But what I want to do here, what I want to do is fill them all with 500, let's say. So how can we do how can we do that in JavaScript? So let's actually go ahead and do that. So if I do funds dot fill and I pass in a value, let's say 500. Okay, so notice that this is a string. So if we have an array with numbers, but what we want to do is fill it with some strings, right? So we can use the fill method to fill the array with the strings. So if I do console log here and I check funds, and let's see what it has. So node index.js. So you see that we have an array with string, not numbers, string of 500, and this fill method fills all the array with some value. You may think this video is all about fill, but I want to discuss a few more things. Like I've been talking a lot about we are not just limited to store numbers or strings in an array, but we can store JSON objects. We saw that we can store numbers, we can store strings, we can store floating point numbers, we can store boolean values. Okay, let's say we have an array and we want to fill it all with uh, this boolean value, which is true, right? So we can also do that. So if I run my code, you'll see that my whole array is filled with trues basically. But we can also store functions in an array, right? So let's say we want to create a function which is going to print hello world on screen, and we want to fill an array with this method. Okay, we want to fill all my arrays with this method. Okay, so I can do that. Basically I can just return hello world, right? So what this method is going to do, this fill method, it's fill all of this array with this function. Okay, it's not going to fill it with hello world, but it's going to fill it with this function. So let me print this, let me run this code and let me show you what our array has in it now. So you can see that our array now has functions in it, right? So every single element of our array is now a function. And how can we call a function? So we call a function by typing the function name, right? Sorry, not that. So let's say we have a function. How do we call it? We call it like this, right? So we type function name and then parentheses, and that's how we call a function. In our case, our functions are stored in an array. So how are we going to call, let's say, this first function which we have in our array? So we also know that we can access an element of an array by using the index, right? So if I want to access the element the first element of an array, I can do so like this, right? But you also know that in our example here, we filled our array with functions. So what I can do, I know that my first element or all of my elements in this array are functions. So I can just use parentheses like this, and it's going to call that method, right? And we also know that the functions which we stored in our array, they are returning hello world, right? They are returning this text hello world. So what I can do, basically, I know that this function will return hello world, so I can do console.log and call this function inside it, right? So this function is going to return hello world, and this console.log is going to print that hello world on screen. So if I save my code and if I run my code now, you see that I get hello world. So that's pretty amazing, right? So what we did, basically, we used our fill method to fill our array with functions, and then we called one of the functions that we had stored in that array using this syntax, which makes it pretty cool, right? So I mean, we were learning fill, but fill was not very it was not very exciting. So I'm just filling my array with some numbers or in some strings. I can fill my array with JSON objects, right? But the cool thing about JavaScript is that in JavaScript arrays, we can also store functions, and we can call those functions like this. So it makes JavaScript very powerful and um, pretty amazing, actually. So this was all about the fill method, and you now know that if you have a scenario in your programs where you wanted to fill some values in an array and later on access those values, so you can use this fill method and you can fill your arrays with some values. Okay, let's actually go ahead and fill our array with a JSON object here. So let's say I want to fill my array with this JSON object, which is just saying Bilal, username Bilal, and age 30, right? So now I know that this my array is getting filled with JSON objects, so it's not there are no functions in my array. So I can remove this and I can just maybe print my array to see what it has, and if you guess what it's going to have, then I guess you are correct, and it's going to fill my array with this JSON object like that. Okay, so it can be useful in many scenarios. Yes, so I guess this is all for this video. So if you find a use case for this method, feel free to tell me in the comments below and let others know as well. So this is all for now.